Welcome to this Explainer. Today we're uncovering a truly fascinating gap in how we understand social structures. We're going to look at how social hierarchies are written down in ancient sacred textbooks versus how they actually operate on the ground in real life. It's a classic showdown of theory versus practice, and let me tell you, the reality is way more complex and dynamic than you might think.
So let's just dive right in and challenge a massive preconception. Most of us are taught that the traditional caste system is this incredibly rigid, unchangeable hierarchy where your place is entirely fixed from the moment you're born. But is it actually set in stone? If we zoom in and look closely at the day-to-day lives of people, does that strict, unbending rulebook actually apply?
To make sense of this, sociologist M.N. Srinivas gave us a pretty brilliant framework. He distinguished between the book view and the field view. The book view is what you get straight from the scriptures. It tells us the hierarchy is fixed, driven by strict rules of purity and pollution, and totally uncontestable. But then you have the field view. This is the messy, lived reality observed by anthropologists in actual villages. And in the field view, the hierarchy is surprisingly adaptable, it's driven by conflict, and it leans heavily on economic and political power.
Let's look at part 1, climbing the social ladder.
When anthropologists packed up and actually went into these villages, they found out that groups aren't just sitting around passively accepting their textbook slots. They actively use tools to move up the social ladder. The primary traditional tool for this is something Srinivas called Sanskritization. This is a fascinating process where a lower caste tries to boost its social rank by taking over the customs of a higher, often twice-born caste. They might give up liquor, switch to a vegetarian diet, and start demanding a Brahmin priest for their ceremonies. Basically, it's a way of claiming higher status by adopting the exact symbols of purity used by the dominant groups.
But on the flip side, you've got Westernization. While lower castes are adopting traditional rituals to move up, higher castes, especially in the big cities, are often doing the exact opposite. They undergo Westernization, embracing Western education, secularism, and rationalism. It's kind of wild when you think about it. In terms of secularism, Westernization stands completely opposed to the heavy religious focus of Sanskritization.
What's super interesting about Srinivas's work here is the contrast between these two movements. Sanskritization is almost always a team sport. A whole community decides to change its habits together to rise up the ranks. Westernization, though, it doesn't really have that same traditional upward mobility goal, and it usually happens on an individual or family level rather than a whole caste movement. And ironically, the spread of traditional Sanskritization was actually massively helped along by the technological products of Westernization. We're talking newspapers, radios, and films.
And here is where reality just completely shatters the textbook rules. It turns out you don't always have to copy the higher castes to claim power. Some groups just reject upper caste superiority altogether. For example, researchers found that certain castes in eastern Uttar Pradesh asserted their upward mobility not by mimicking Brahmins, but by refusing to accept water from them. Talk about a power move, right? They claimed that they were actually the pure ones. This completely flips the traditional book view of superiority right on its head.
Moving on to Section 2, the power of politics. As India modernized, the playbook for social mobility changed dramatically. We stopped relying solely on ancient rituals and started leveraging the modern power of politics. Take the Jatovs of Agra, studied by anthropologist O.M. Lynch. The Jatovs, who had historically faced stigmatized identities, completely abandoned traditional Sanskritization. Once independent India offered parliamentary democracy, they realized, hey, we don't need upper caste rituals to get ahead. Instead, they took refuge in the democratic constitution, swapping their traditional caste councils for secular associations and political parties.
Instead of using rituals, they used the ballot box. Through political mobilization, these groups fought for the economic and political rights denied to them under the traditional system. The Jatovs formed political parties. The Chamars used urban employment and literacy to read vernacular books and push narratives emphasizing right action over orthodox rituals. And get this, the Nadars of Tamil Nadu didn't even use sacred texts to elevate their status. Back in 1921, they simply used organized political pressure to get the government to officially change their name and social standing.
You might be wondering, why was democracy such a massive game changer? Why did politics work so much better than ancient rituals? Well, it literally comes down to one number: 15%. Dalit leaders mobilized their communities by pointing out a very basic demographic fact. The traditional upper echelons only make up about 15% of the population. That means the mobilized Dalit and Shudra groups represent the vast majority. In a democracy,
Those numbers equal immense electoral power to rewrite the rules of dominance.
Which brings us to Section 3, Grassroots Reality, Village Studies.
To really ground all this, we need to look at specific grassroots studies from actual Indian villages. Let's compare two of them. In Kishangarai, researcher McKim Marriott found a huge gap between the rank assigned to a caste in scriptures and the rank actually given by the villagers. The textbook attributes of a clean diet didn't strictly dictate rank. Meanwhile, over in the village of Bisipara in Orissa, F.G. Bailey found that the system was held together by the concentration of power. When a caste got wealthy, it actively changed its ritual interactions to claim a higher rank. Wealth and local dominance were calling the shots, not ancient texts. The rule-breaking anomalies anthropologists found are just wild. In Kishangari, vegetarian washermen, which is supposed to be a pure diet, shared the exact same rank as non-vegetarian leatherworkers. The textbooks insist Brahmins must be strict vegetarians, yet Kashmiri and Bengali Brahmins eat meat and absolutely maintain their top status. And in Bisapara, a traditionally lower caste of distillers gained wealth and literally refused water from higher-ranked warriors. Actual human behavior and local economics are constantly bending the rules of purity.
Dr. Bailey's study paints a perfect picture of this economic mobility in action. British rule opened up new economic frontiers, and in Bisalipahara, two non-landowning castes suddenly made a ton of money by getting a monopoly on the trade of hides and liquor. Why them? Because handling liquor or hides was considered way too polluting for the higher castes. So the lower castes essentially cornered the market, generated massive wealth, and then used that very economic power to successfully pull themselves up the hierarchy.
Let's move to Section 4, the rules of commensality. So, if the textbook rules of diet and occupation are always being broken, how do villagers actually prove who's who on a daily basis? The secret lies in something called commensality. Anthropologist Adrian C. Mayer studied Ramkari village and discovered that social rank was intimately mapped out by this strict regulation of interdining. Economic wealth can be a tricky indicator because it cuts across caste lines, but ritual status, that is proven every single day by who you accept food and water from, who you sit next to while eating, and even if your water is served in a brass or earthen vessel.
It's an incredibly intricate web. Mayer's findings operate on the principle that eating food prepared by another group denotes either equality with them or inferiority to them. Brahmins are at the top. They only eat food cooked by their own caste, but everyone else accepts food from them. Rajputs accept from Brahmins, but refuse from carpenters. Sweepers are at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy, accepting food from no one directly, but instead eating the leftovers from the plates of other castes. This daily matrix of who accepts what from whom clearly draws the lines of local hierarchy in a way that textbooks simply cannot capture.
So, what's the big takeaway from this explainer? It's that relying purely on sacred texts gives us a totally static and honestly false picture of society. The book view gives us a prescriptive order that just does not work in all situations. The reality on the ground, the field view, is profoundly influenced by wealth, demographic dominance, and political change. The system isn't rigid, it is constantly being negotiated and challenged. Which brings us to a really fascinating place to wrap up. We've seen how constitutional provisions, electoral politics, and new economic frontiers have equipped groups to completely hack and challenge an ancient system. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If political power and shifting economies can rewrite supposedly immutable, sacred ranks, what does that mean for the future of social hierarchies everywhere? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today.